Greetings! My name is Alana Lewandowski, and I am a contemplative roots songwriter and recording artist from Treaty 2 territory in Manitoba, Canada. You're currently listening to Sunday Song and Rumination, a radio and podcast show that features some of my musings and music. Every Sunday, you will get to tune in, and you can even leave me an audio message here, which may end up on a future show. To learn more about me and my music, you can go to my website. I'm over on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the streaming platforms and more. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying.
Ring out wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty light. The year is dying in the night. Ring out wild bells and let him die. Ring out the old, ring in the new. Ring happy bells across the snow. The year is going, let him go. Ring out the false, ring in the true. Ring out the grief that saps the mind. For those that here we see no more. Ring out the feud of rich and poor. Ring in redress to all mankind. Ring out a slowly dying cause and ancient forms of party strife. Ring in the nobler modes of life with sweeter manners, purer laws. Ring out the want, the care, the sin, the faithless coldness of the times. Ring out my mournful rhymes, but ring the fuller minstrel in. Ring out false pride in place and blood, the civic slander and the spite. Ring in the love of truth and right. Ring in the common love of good. Ring out old shapes of foul disease. Ring out the narrowing lust of gold. Ring out the 1,000 wars of old. Ring in the 1,000 years of peace. Ring in the valiant man and free, the larger heart, the kindlier hand. Ring out the darkness of the land. Ring in the Christ that is to be.
Ring out wild bells to the wild sky.
Greetings. Well, I am recording this on New Year's Day, 2021, and it's been 4 days since I released my steampunk-styled music video with my version of Alfred Lord Tennyson's famous New Year's poem, Ring Out Wild Bells. It was published in 1850, but it was written much before that, in the 1830s, as Tennyson was processing the sudden death of his dear friend, who was also his sister's beloved fiancé. And this man's name was Arthur Henry Hallam, and he was just 22 years old when he died. And the grief really struck Tennyson, and he went into a deep point of suffering and grief over the loss of his friend. I thought that I would re-record my version of it. I put the music to it. The lyrics obviously are Tennyson's. And I had never really professionally recorded it before. And so I thought I would do that and get my mixing and mastering engineer to do his magic, and played all the instruments and just got it done. and then made this steampunk-styled music video for it as a gift to all my listeners and to whomever it might serve as we rang out the year of 2020, which has been a very strange, nearly absurd year, filled with suffering and loss and frustration. And so I thought I would evoke the sacred clown and bring that element into it with my steampunk costumes and the makeup, and deliver. Someone described it as a sort of bittersweet way of delivering our hopes and also the things that hold us back. So Ring Out Wild Bells as a poem is absolutely exquisite. And it basically, the theme of it is all of this ringing, what we would like to ring out and what we would like to ring in. It's quite a simple theme, really, but the way he covers the gamut is just beautiful. And especially if you are really a fan of that Victorian style of poetry, which I am. And that's why I also picked the steampunk theme, because steampunk is a takeoff of the Victorian era, the style of the Victorian era, but also the technology at that time. So gears, steam engines, and like the gears of clocks and that sort of thing, and also the hot air balloon era, and you probably notice if you watch the video that I have a plague doctor playing the guitar, and I didn't have him there to poke fun whatsoever. What I was actually doing was sort of embodying a frontline worker from times gone by, and having that sort of somber element in with everything else. So it wasn't just fun. There's a serious side to it too. And one of the stories that I told prior to this video being released was the story of how the Franciscans saw the jugglers as holy. And I told the legend that I told it very similarly to the picture book, The Clown of God, that was published in 1974. But that picture book was inspired by a legend. And the legend is about this little boy named Giovanni, who's a little juggler, and he goes to a vegetable stand every day, and he picks up vegetables and juggles them. And the people who run the stand love it when he does this, and they basically create a little agreement that if he juggles their vegetables and draws attention to their stand, that they will feed him every day. And so that's how he embarks on this journey as a juggler. And then he goes through his life. He ends up being taken up by this traveling theater group and becomes quite a professional juggler in the group, and builds his repertoire and his costumes and his makeup, and then ends up embarking on his own. And by this time, he's got the capacity to juggle flames and all sorts of impressive juggling tactics. But the very pinnacle of his performance is these balls that are the color of the rainbow. And then he has this one ball that's the golden ball, and it goes the highest and becomes the centerpiece for his entire performance. And everyone is wowed by it. And he gets by through his life traveling around as this itinerant juggler. And he is encountered at one point by some Franciscan brothers who tell him that what he does is holy. And this is a time that is no stranger to plagues and suffering. And so they come along and say to him, don't let anyone tell you what you're doing is not needed. Don't let anyone tell you what you're doing is not holy. What you are doing is bringing in this essential thread to the fabric of life. And if you can make people laugh, if you can lift up their hope and what they intuit inside of themselves to be true, to be truly true, then you are doing sacred work. So he continues on doing his juggling, and he becomes an old man. And one time he's doing his performance, and he goes to do his juggling act with the colorful balls and the golden ball, and he drops the balls. And he realizes that perhaps that his age has caught up with him, and he has to retire. He has to put his costumes and all of his juggling gear away. And he ends up going around begging for his food. And it's a Christmas Eve when he hears this music ringing out from a church, and he sees this Franciscan procession inside the church, and it's absolutely beautiful. And the procession moves toward a statue of the Mother Mary and the baby Jesus. And he looks at their faces and sees that they have a very solemn, morose, serious, stringent look on their face. And he's quite disturbed by that, being a juggler. And so he waits until everyone leaves, and he pulls out his costume, and he pulls out his makeup, and he pulls out all his gear, and he gets ready, and he begins juggling for the Mother Mary and the baby Jesus. Well, there's this one Franciscan brother who happens to be, shall we say, someone who likes to follow all the rules to a T. Maybe to the point where he has forgotten that that the one that he claims to follow, Francis and Jesus, are really a double entendre. And he's failing to catch the subtleties that are at work and at play whenever the light shines just so anywhere. So he goes running out of the church to go and tattle and tell on this homeless juggler who is sort of defacing the sacredness of the church and of the statue. And how dare he? So there he goes off to tell and to report. And so here is this juggler doing his thing. He juggles the flames, he juggles all knives, he juggles so many things, but at the very end, the most impressive is when he can get all of these rainbow-colored balls going in a circle, and the golden one somehow manages to go up, 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 higher and higher. And he does that particular performance the best he's ever done it in his entire life. And it turns out that it is his swan song, because after he has done his performance, he dies. He passes on. And here come the Franciscan brothers running into the church, and there is the clown lying with his costumes and his juggling gear all around him. And they look at the mother and the baby Jesus, and they are both smiling. And the baby Jesus is holding the golden ball. We'll get right back into this episode after I cordially invite you to join me on Patreon, a platform that, since its inception, has empowered many artists to achieve sovereignty over their own work. As one patron has put it, I'm not a patron of Alana's work to just get stuff. I take delight in providing a fertile field out of which her work can spring forth. Please join me at www.patreon.com/Alana Lewandowski and help me to continue making professional music for contemplative seekers and music lovers alike. So I don't think I would have been able to make my steampunk video had I not been reading that to my children. In part because it just really resonated with readings that I had done many years ago with Martin Prachtel's work of grief and praise in particular. If you get a chance to read his work, he is very rightly critical of colonial Christianity, but he has an indigenous heart, and it's absolutely beautiful, insightful work. But he talks about grief and praise being the two sides of the same coin, and how to grieve someone is to praise them, and to praise someone, you must be ready to grieve. And that was kind of what I was attempting to do with the music video, was to give both this bittersweet thread of this year, and to bring a little bit of a zany, even burlesque type thread to it. And I looked up burlesque, and it really means to cause laughter by sort of creating a caricature of a more serious work, of drama, of a literary work, or of music, and of theater. And so it is to basically create an opening for tears. Because if you ask my husband, he'll tell you that if I get a good laugh going, very quickly I end up in a good cry. And it's this release that is so universal. And that was kind of what I was going for. And then just one other quick thing I'd like to say is that in some of the lines, in particular, one very specific thing I would like to say, I don't like to conflate poetry and ancient story into purposes of my own for my own time. However, one thing I will say is that when I sing Purer Laws, the line, ring in with sweeter manners and purer laws, I am not trying to encourage bypassing what we have learned this year about the heavy lifting and the willingness that is needed for us to work toward a more equitable world. And when I sing Purer Laws, one of the people who come to mind is Senator Murray Sinclair, who has just announced his retirement. And he is a Canadian lawyer who is a pioneer, an Indigenous pioneer who has done immense amounts of work for this land. And he also led the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which I got to take part in Edmonton and Winnipeg. And I announced on Facebook when I announced Murray Sinclair's retirement. And remember, he's not just retiring. The reason why he's retiring is so that he can mentor younger Indigenous lawyers. And that is showing his wisdom, that he knows when and where to put his time in order for the next 7 generations to be served up the way he sees fit. And I see his face because the Truth and Reconciliation Commission has done more for me as someone of colonial settler descent than any spiritual retreat has ever done. It decentered me. It humbled me. It changed me and transformed me through such remarkable courage to tell stories and the kind of forgiveness that I experienced in people's eyes and embrace. And so my only regret is that I didn't invest in traveling to all of the commissions that occurred. There were 10 of them, once per year. And the trajectory that set in motion, even though it's slow, it's slow, is for policy change here, because our policies are archaic. Here in Canada, we passed the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, but it doesn't harmonize yet with our old, very racist laws. And so laws that were written a long time ago. And so when I sing purer laws, that is what comes up in my heart. And also, one more thing about this, some of the hopes that Tennyson had there, I think are deeply universal and raw and beautiful and exquisitely written. But I also did not want the intention for me was to ring in some hope, but also I didn't want people to feel like uniformity is unity. We've had a lot of uniformity, and sometimes we mistake sweet manners and pure laws for being quote unquote civilized. And that word is loaded with violence. And it was used well before Christianity was Romanized. When Rome invaded Britain in 46 AD, that was the term that they used, was to try and civilize the tribes. And while we know that what that led to, just the race to the moon for the European countries that were attempting to colonize all these and quote unquote discover these lands that were inhabited by incredible people already. So, I just wanted to speak to that as well. And then I'll just let you listen to the song. I've got links. And this radio show, this podcast is going to be a radio show. And I'm going to be able to put in some Spotify streams. And I may even use other people's work eventually, because it'll stream their work and it'll let other people know about it. But for today, I'm not going to include the song because it takes a little bit of time for the permissions to occur. So I'm just going to leave links and announce that this is my new radio show, and it's the first one, hopefully, of many. Thank you so much for helping Ring Out Wild Bells, my version, to move its way across the snow and across the world in the last 4 days. There are many, many stories. People played my song and then rang out their own bells from their churches. And there's a story of my husband's friend in Ontario. They ended up deciding he's a bagpipe player, a professional pipe player, and some other pipe players learned my melody and played it out across their village and then rang out the bells. And so I'm just in awe and very honored that this got to serve in this way this year. Thank you so much.
Ring in the Christ that is to be. Ring our wild bells to the wild sky, the flying cloud, the frosty.
Well, that's it for this week's Sunday Song and Rumination radio show. I'm your host, Alana Lewandowski. Be sure to subscribe to this, give it a review, and most importantly, please send me an audio message. I would love to hear from you. I'm sure that your words could be more profound than my own, so your message may end up on a future episode. Until then, I'm signing off in the deep peace.